Welcome back all of you. Continuing with the part of sustainable development. In previous lecture we studied the definition and concepts of sustainability and sustainable development. We looked at 3 pillars of sustainability and also we looked at strong and weak sustainability types along with their case studies. So, now we will read about sustainable development goals. All of you must be knowing that these were proposed by United Nations and there are 17 sustainable development goals. So, based on these 17 SDGs, there is something called as SDG index, sustainable development goal index, which is calculated as a final score for all of these 17 goals for all the member countries of United Nations, and then we will look at some examples and case study like how that SDG index is used. Okay. So, before sustainable development goals, there was a concept called as Millennium Development Goals. Okay. So, and it was also proposed by United Nations, and these were the 8 goals set by 189 United Nations member states in September 2000, and each of those 189 member states, they agreed that we will try to achieve those Millennium Development Goals by the year 2015. So, you can call it as like a this 8 goals and a 15-year plan. Those goals were eradicate extreme poverty and hunger, achieve universal primary education, promote gender equality and empower women, reduce child mortality, improved maternal health like combat HIV, AIDS, malaria and other diseases, ensure environmental sustainability and develop a global partnership for development. So, when these 8 goals were there, and you can see they are like trying to cover different aspects, like we saw 3 pillars of sustainability. So, here like what we see is like environmental sustainability is just one goal, that is 7, and other 7 goals, the remaining 7 goals, they are dealing mainly with the social aspects, with maybe one just with respect to partnership you can call it as the economic aspect. Mostly these were social goals and one was environmental goal. So, there was clearly a need for a more comprehensive network, but then what was the outcome of this MDGs? So, by 2015 MDGs had achieved significant but limited progress. Limited in the sense like they were not replicated or tried to be achieved in all the countries, especially in developing countries. Okay. So, they focused mainly on developing countries and they did not include climate change, inequality or sustainable consumption. Also, they did not address larger environmental issues, hence there was a need for a more comprehensive global framework. And just like it was MDGs were defined in 2000 year for the target year 2015, SDGs were defined in 2015 for the target year 2030. But before 2015, in 2012 there was a conference, this Rio Plus 20 conference, and at this conference the need to develop new goals for sustainability at global level was addressed. And at this conference a open working group was formed from the employees of 70 countries, and they drafted the list of 17 sustainable development goals. And this list then was followed by it was subjected to public consultation, and it encountered lot of negotiations by all the member nations like 193 countries at the United Nations General Assembly in the subsequent years, and then we got this final 17 sustainable development goals. So, how do we define it? It is a call for action by all countries, poor, rich and middle income countries, to promote peace and prosperity while protecting the planet or environment. Okay. So, that is the definition for sustainable development goals. It is a call for action to all the countries in the world irrespective of their economic status or the development status, and they should come together and take actions which will help address or promote all 3 pillars of those sustainable development, it is peace, prosperity and planet. And the agenda was 2030 agenda for sustainable development. 17 goals were adopted at United Nations Sustainable Development Summit in New York on 23rd September 2015. So, in September 2015 these were adopted and they became effective in 2016, 1 January 2016 those 17 SDGs were brought into effect. During the same time, since a lot of emphasis was given to this environmental pillar of the sustainability, there was another big event right after this 17 SDGs were formed, which is known as Paris Agreement on Climate Change in December 2015, and it was enforced almost 1 year later in November 2016. So, it is good to see that these two historic events happened in a very short span of time, almost at the similar time. So, the year 2015 can be considered as a remarkable year so far as sustainable development goals and its environmental protection or the climate change combatment is concerned. The 17 SDGs, they represent the global plan to improve people's lives, protect the planet and ensure prosperity for all by 2030. And what are these 17 goals? They are like no poverty, zero hunger, good health, well-being, quality education, gender equality, and there are many. The final one is the partnership for the goals. So, like 7 or those MDGs which were there, they are almost covered here in one or the other of the 17. So, we are not leaving none of the goals of MDGs were neglected, but additional goals were added to cover all 3 pillars of sustainability. So, if we try to cluster these 17 goals into 3 pillars, how they would look like. So, poverty, hunger, good health, decent work, economic growth and industry innovation, they came under the economic pillar. Environmental pillar is a huge one which deals with water, energy, responsible consumption, climate action, life below water and life on land. And then there is a social pillar which deals with education, equality, inequality, sustainable cities, communities, peace and partnerships. Okay. But if you look into the real world, sustainability issues rarely belong to only one domain. Let us take example of zero hunger. Now, to promote zero hunger, it is not just a matter of economics, it would equally come under the social pillar also, because it is a society whom we need to feed and find ways to feed. It will have a lot to do with the policies in that particular region, which will try to ensure that nobody in that region stays hungry. And if we have to provide food, where that food will come from, how that food will be transported, how that food will be processed, the industries, the emissions, the transportation, the growing and cutting and harvesting, all those things would come under the environmental pillar also. So, it is rare that any of the sustainability issue will belong only to one domain. For example, water, energy, cities, consumption, poverty all have all 3 dimensions. They have environmental, economic and social dimensions. But just like which of the goals is addressing which of the pillars more, based on that this classification has been done. Also, United Nations SDG framework, it promotes integration. So, there is a possibility and it should happen, the overlapping of goals between each other and not separation. Okay. So, it is likely possible that amongst these 17 goals also there is a strong interconnect, interdependency and overlapping amongst the goals also, not only amongst the pillars, but amongst each of the 17 goals. For example, the goal number 17 and 16, they are applicable to almost each and every goal mentioned here under each of these pillars, because whenever there would be any dispute or fight, you would go to these peace strong institutions, and instead of doing something alone or individually, if something has to be done in the group or in partnerships, that is what the goal number 17 recommends. So, SDGs at United Nations, like who looks after these SDGs, who evaluates, okay, let us look at that. So, there is a division for sustainable development goals in the United Nations, Department of Economic and Social Affairs, and it is this department which provides a lot of support and capacity building for these maintenance of SDGs and their related issues. Every year United Nations Secretary General, they present an annual SDG progress report, and Global Sustainable Development Report is produced once every 4 years. Okay. And this report is written by independent group of scientists from all over the world, which are generally appointed by the Secretary General of the United Nations. So, SDG index is that score which is included in that Global Sustainable Development Report. SDG index or Sustainable Development Goal Index, it provides a comprehensive assessment of distance to targets, means how long or how much more time we need to achieve a particular target. Okay. So, based on the most up to date data for all the 193 UN member states, this SDG index provides a comprehensive assessment. It measures the performance on all the 17 SDGs, and for each SDG there may be like 10, 20 indicators or parameters based on which overall score of that one SDG is counted for. So, there are 17 SDGs, so they use multiple indicators, more than 100 indicators are being used at present. In 2024's report, there were 98 global indicators and 27 additional indicators specifically for this developed nations or OECD countries, because some of the parameters they were not equally applicable to poorer countries and richer countries. Then SDG index, it can be defined as a composite score that shows how close a country, a state or a city is to achieving SDGs. So, if a score is on the scale of 0 to 100, any country or any state achieving the score of 100 would be the best one. The SDG index of 100 is considered to be the best one. SDG score of 0 would be the worst one. So, how do we calculate this SDG index? Let us look at the process. The first step is select or identify the indicators for each SDG. So, since there are 17 sustainable development goals, this index calculation is done one by one, like first. So, if we do it for each SDG, there will be 17 SDG indexes, and the average of that would give us the final SDG index. So, what do you mean by indicators? Let us take example of goal number 3, which is related to health. So, indicator can be life expectancy, mortality, okay, infant birth rate, or number of hospitals, okay. All these things would contribute to the healthcare to this SDG 3. SDG 4, education, like good well-being and decent economic growth, right. So, literacy rate, the enrollment in the schools, those can be the indicators. For SDG 7, that is clean and affordable energy, there access to electricity, clean energy. I have given here just two indicators for each, and instead of 17 we considered only 3 goals randomly and 2 indicators for each, so that it is easy for you to understand the calculations. Normalize each indicator. So, once we have listed down all the indicators for each SDG, you normalize each indicator, and this indicator is converted to a 0 to 100 scale based on globally defined target values and worst values. Even though mathematically the indicator can be rated as 0 to 100, but in real world any indicator would have certain range of values. For example, like life expectancy or the lifeline, the total life which people usually live. So, the lowest can be 1 or 2 and highest can be 100, 120, but based on the majority data for globally level target, the age can be somewhere defined as say like 60 to 90. So, that is a range. So, according to within that range, the criteria for that age, maximum age would be adjusted. Now, in this indicators, normalizing indicators is little bit tricky, because for all the indicators higher value may not be the better value. For some indicators like literacy or education or access to energy, electricity, higher the value, higher value is the better indicator. So, in that case normalized score will be using this formula x minus x minimum by the target value minus x minimum value. And for lower is better indicator like pollution, mortality, that should be the death rate, it should be low. The lower value for it, it means the indicator is performing better. So, for that normalized score would be calculated as x max minus x upon x max minus x target. Okay. So, that all the indicators irrespective of whether they are in the higher is better category or lower is better category, they are normalized unbiasedly and sensibly. So, first step, select indicators, list all the indicators for each SDG, normalize each indicators over a scale of 0 to 100 using global target and worst values, average the indicator scores to get SDG score. For each SDG you will get a SDG score which will be the average of its all the indicator scores, and then average out all the 17 SDG scores to get the final SDG index. So, final SDG index will be the average of scores of all the 17 SDGs. So, these are the 4 steps which are typically followed to calculate SDG index. Let us take one numerical example so that it is easy for you to understand. So, let us take one example, a numerical example to see how SDG index is calculated. So, continuing with the same SDGs 3, 4 and 7, health, education, energy. Okay. So, for health, one of the indicators is life expectancy. So, the target value globally is 85 years, worst value is 50 years, and the country for which we are calculating the SDG index based on just these 3 goals, let us assume it is 70. Okay. Similarly, for education, the indicator is literacy rate. So, obviously, literacy rate of 100% is achievable. So, target is 100%. Worst value considering all the data available with all the countries, if it is say 50%, and the country's value for which we are doing this calculation is 80%. For energy, if the indicator is access to electricity or access, again it is possible that all the people in the country should have access to energy. So, target value is 100, worst is 0 and country's value is 90. Okay. Now, let us look at like how do we do it, how do we do the calculation for health. So, life expectancy higher the better, literacy rate higher the better, and access is also higher the better. So, for all 3 the formula for calculating that score would be same. The country's value which is 70 minus minimum value, this worst value is x minimum and this is target value which is x maximum, and the value for the country is x. Okay. So, for higher the better, it is x minus x minimum upon x max minus x minimum into 100. So, the score is 57.1. You can do that calculation and just check if it comes out to be this or if it is different, but it should come out close to this number. Now, similarly, if you do it for education, it will be country's value, that is x minus x minimum, and this is x max minus x minimum into 100. So, SDG 4 score is coming out to be 60. So, does it 80 minus 50, so it is like say 30 upon 50 and this is 100. So, 5 60, yeah. So, SDG 4 score is 60. For similarly, if you do it for this energy access, can you try to find the value with me? What will be the number here? 90 minus worst is x minimum is 0, then x max is 100, x minimum is 0, right, am I right? So, yeah, and this is into 100. So, it is 90 by 100 into 100, 100 cuts out. So, score is 90. So, SDG 7 score is coming out to be 90. So, what we did from the values of indicators, normalizing those values, converting it to the score of individual SDG. Now, final SDG index can be calculated as the average of these 3 SDGs, 57 plus 60 plus 90 by 3. It should come out somewhere around 69.03. So, that is the final SDG index. Can you imagine like how it can be done for all 17 SDGs? So, if we have this data of different indicators for each of the 17 SDGs for different countries, we can calculate the scores, the SDG scores for each of the 17 SDGs and then combine and take the average to find the final SDG index. So, the same activity is repeated for all 17 goals, there are for all 100 plus indicators for all 193 countries, but again the data for those 193 countries has to be provided by respective countries. This is just a brief summary of the calculations that we did for 3 SDGs. These were the 3 indicators, these were the values reported by the country, and on the normalized score of 0 to 100, these were the scores of individual SDG and this is the final SDG index. So, similar exercise can be done for all 17 SDGs, and actual SDG index uses many indicators per SDG. So, here in this example I have used only one indicator for one SDG. There can be multiple indicators for single SDG also. Okay. Now, let us look at the Sustainable Development Goal Report, or sometimes it is called as Sustainable Development Report 2024. This is the global level report. And how do we read this diagram? So, you have these 17 goals listed here, and you can notice some of the goals are having green arrows, which means these SDGs are achieved, or they are either achieved or they are on track for maintaining SDG achievement. So, for achieved SDG, the whole block has to be green, but none of the blocks are green. It means none of the SDGs are achieved till now. It started in 2016, we are in 2025, that is almost 9 years, but in 9 years we have not achieved even a single SDG. Red means there are major challenges which needs to be addressed. Orange means significant challenges are there, they are less than major, and in yellow there are challenges which are minor, but there are challenges which needs to be addressed. So, good to see that at least half or more than half, I think exactly half or less than half are in the significant challenge remain and SDG in the zone, and more than half are in the zone of major challenges. Now, that is about the whether the SDGs are achieved or not, or whether they have challenges or not. Now, the arrows shows, the green arrow means we are on track of maintaining those SDGs. So, no poverty and quality education. So, there is a lot of work done in most of the United Nations member states on these two fronts, that people do not stay poor and they get access to quality education. Then the arrows which are like slightly tilted and orange in color, yellow in color, it shows they are moderately improving. Okay. So, moderately improvements, there is a lot of effort and work undergoing in these SDGs, and they are moving gradually towards making it either green or towards making it orange, yellow, from red to orange and orange to yellow, and yellow to green would be the final destination. The red or the orange flat horizontal arrow means the efforts or the progress in these respective goals has been stagnated. So, there is no up or down shifting or movement there, and the red, it means decreasing, it is going in a negative direction. So, climate action, that is why this 1.5 degree, 2 degree, these are the global warming, climate change, they really need lot of more efforts by pushing more towards renewables and reducing the fossil fuels consumption. So, it is going negatively, that is sustainable cities and goal number 11 and 13. So, the main summary or findings of this SDG report 2024 was only 16% of SDG targets are on track, and amongst all the 193 countries, the Nordic countries in the Europe, they lead with Finland of having the score of 86.4 ranking first. If you remember that SDG index score 0 to 100. So, in that you can see the country which is ranking first has the score of 86.4. But it was good to know that East and South Asia, they showed most SDG progress since 2015. So, that was a positive side, because lot of population in the world live in these regions of the world. If you look at India's performance in 2024, this is another way, just way to represent all these 17 SDGs in a different form of diagram, and these numbers like 0, 25, 50, these represent the SDG score. Anything with 100 would be the best one. So, you can see that India it ranks 109th out of those 193 countries. So, we are somewhere in the top 60% of all the countries, and our score was 64 overall score. About 30% of SDG targets are on track, and there is limited progress in the other 40%, but in the remaining 30% the situation is worsening. You can identify from this diagram. The one which are on the track would be this, okay. The one which are worsening would be these ones, the one which has the smallest peaks. The highest performance is in goal number 1, 4, 12 and 13. So, that is 1, 4, 12 and 13. So, that was all about sustainable development goals. We saw why there was a need for sustainable development goals after millennium development goals. Millennium development goals were from 2000 to 2015. In 15 we had SDGs and now the target year is 2030. How many goals are there? 17. They can be classified under 3 pillars, but then they need not be specific only to that pillar, but there can be lot of overlap between each of the goals and each of the pillars. So, there is a lot of interconnection between the 17 sustainable development goals. Then we looked at SDG index, it is a score from 0 to 100, and we looked at with the example of like how this SDG index is calculated over a scale of 0 to 100, and we saw from the report of 2024 like for all the countries, the Finland with highest score of 86 point something had a final SDG index. So, even though it is on the scale of 0 to 100, the topmost country or the country ranking first is not having the score of 100. So, there is always a room for improvement even for the best performing country. That is what the overall crux is for calculating SDG index based on realistic indicators. Okay. There can be multiple indicators for each SDGs, and once you calculate score for each SDG, you calculate for all 17 SDGs and then take average of it to find the final SDG index for that particular country. That is what we studied today. Thank you so much.